around for 3 cycles, and we kept getting rejected, did not get funded. And kind of turned out that most of them were somehow related to Route 66. The majority of them were, which of course is a big initiative for him right now. And he listened to everybody, and he basically said, this is too difficult. I can't pick one of you. You're all doing great ideas. You all get together and come up with one application. I want all of you to be part of it. So that was UNM School of Architecture and Planning, MAFCA, Metropolitan Flood Control Authority. We had done some public art projects with them. The Cultural Services Department, we basically sort of pulled back and said, we'll put our idea on the back burner, although it kind of tied in. A nonprofit organization called Little Globe, which is a community engagement, arts engagement organization that uses the arts to help people talk about how they want to make their community better. And another nonprofit organization called Story of Place. And they're sort of, they do anthropologically based storytelling. They go in and they interview members of the community and find out what the sort of deep stories are of the community. And so they all had sort of different ideas about what they wanted to do with these funds. And after probably 2 months of meetings with this big, huge team around the table trying to figure out what our true commonalities were. At this point, like I said, the Cultural Services Department pulled back and said, well, we'll just facilitate, because we knew we would have to be the organization that applied for the grant within the city government, the city department. Because the way our town grant works is there's got to be a municipal or local government and some sort of nonprofit. So it turns out that we had 2 nonprofits, 1 additional quasi-governmental agency, which is MAFCA, and the university. So we came up with this idea of doing something in the International District in Albuquerque, which is an area that's has struggled and has seen different periods of community involvement and problems. Most people know it as formerly as the war zone, and it's a area that's had a lot of crime and violence, but it's also a very embedded grassroots community that is trying to turn things around, make things better. So everybody decided that we wanted to do this project in that community. So we had an underserved community that was identified. They were not, they didn't self-identify, except for the fact that Story of Place and Little Globe were already doing projects in that area, and this is the area that they wanted to work in. The University of New Mexico School of Architecture and Planning wanted to do pretty much anything along Route 66, but they knew that they were also doing work in the International District. And it just so happened that MAFCA, the Flood Control Authority, has been grappling with some serious storm drainage issues around the state fairgrounds. There's a lot of problems there with the way it's situated in the community within the city that has a lot of flood control problems and also water quality control problems because of the livestock uses, which are very kind of extremely challenging and rather bizarre right in the middle of a big urban city to have all of these, like regular year-round livestock uses and not having good flood or water control. What happens with rainwater that gets captured in the same area that there's livestock. So we all decided that we would be able to work together on something to develop a public space that would be able to be about Route 66. The community would identify what they wanted that space to be. But with the MAFCA at the table, we now had a really interesting opportunity to have access to water, especially runoff water, the water that needed to be filtered or decontaminated of some process at some level before it goes into the rest of the river system. So AFCA said, well, we've got to deal with this, extra water that's pooling up at the state fairgrounds. We'd rather capture it before it gets contaminated with the livestock and do something else with it. Let's get it off-site. So that became really intriguing to us, how water and the flow of water in that area, which, we're not too far away from a couple of major canyons, arroyos, historic arroyos in that area. So the idea became about how do stories flow, and how could water be a metaphor for the way stories flow. So we came up with the idea of story gardens, which to this day we still don't know exactly what a story garden is, but it's sounding good on paper. And kind of loosely came up with this strategy that Story Place was going to do some getting stories, embedded stories from the community. Little Globe was going to use that information to do some arts engagement with the neighborhood, really hands-on workshops that could result in poetry or dances or performances or even art objects of some sort. All of that information would be handed off to the School of Architecture and Planning for the students to use to inform what kind of ideas they might come up with for starting to develop this public site. And AMAFCA would be brought in to advise as to whether or not there would be water available at whatever site is picked to be able to pull it up out of the ground, out of the storm drainage system, somehow use it in making this place lush, and helping to sort of cleanse the water by filtering it through gardens or through the soil before it ever ended up back into the storm drainage system. So we didn't really know how we were going to pull this all together, but that was kind of the general description of what we decided we could do. And Cultural Services just said, well, we'll be the grant administrators. So somehow we managed to get that all on a page and a half and come up with a budget, just kind of throwing numbers out there about who needed. I will add, though, that a couple of organizations, well, mainly University of New Mexico School of Architecture and Planning, had already identified a couple of individual artists that they wanted to work with, individual artist consultants. And as you probably know, the National Endowment for the Arts is very interested in the artistic quality of a project. And Alf Simon, who's with the School of Architecture and Planning, is very close friends with Buster Simpson, who is a fairly well-known, actually very well-known, public artist from Seattle, Washington, who just so happens to do a lot with water reclamation, the use of water, capturing water. So everybody said, oh, well, Buster should still be part of this project because we've got a MAFTA who's got water, and maybe he could turn some idea. And he was going to be brought in to really work with the students. Another individual that had been identified by the School of Architecture and Planning through sort of personal acquaintances is a woman named Margie Waller, and she actually is currently based in Cincinnati and has written a lot of research, done a lot of research and written a lot of reports on how the arts actually affect a community. About 3 years ago, has it been 3 years ago? Yeah, about 3 years ago, she did a study, a major study, and wrote a report called The Ripple Effect. And that talks about how a lot of us in policy use the wrong words to talk about why art is good for the community. And she went out and really interviewed a bunch of people and got really good feedback about how just sort of lay people feel the arts are good for the community. And the sort of underlying tone of what they all had to say was, well, the arts have a really good ripple effect. Don't ask me to describe it, but I know that it makes our life better, it's better places to go, it's good for artists, and artists is good for tourism, and so it was this whole idea of the ripple effect. Michael Pride, who is the community outreach person with the School of Architecture and Planning, had lived in Cincinnati and worked with Margie Waller. So she got brought in on the team too. So Margie has a really good national profile. So does Buster Simpson. So I think those two people added to our team in kind of lower level consulting capacities probably caught the attention of some of the grant reviewers that maybe if it was just purely a local based project, we might not have captured their attention. I'm glad we got it, but I also feel I have a little bit of reservation myself about Buster being an outside artist from Seattle coming in and working with this community. But the way we offset that was Little Globe hired all local artists to do the arts engagement process. So it'll probably work out. And Buster's doing most of the work with students in the classroom, and it's not like we're picking him a, no offense here, gentlemen, but a middle-aged white guy going into a very culturally diverse community to kind of tell them how to do it. He's going to be working with the students where the arts organization, Little Globe, that's been in that community are really bringing the citizen participants together to do the design work at the citizen level. So I think that and then Margie's contribution, she's basically doing the project evaluation for us as someone who's written reports and done a lot of studies about what resonates in communities as far as the effectiveness of art. That's what she's being brought in to do, to consult us. So we got our application in, listed off all these people, all the way everybody was going to be involved, and frankly, I guess we kind of thought, how could they turn us down? Oh, and then one of the other partners that did come in, because they're also doing work in that area, is the Bernalillo County Health Partnership Initiative. There's a couple of people who have been very involved in community gardens and making lives better in that neighborhood from a health perspective, by using gardening and community engagement. So they just kind of automatically wanted to be part of it. So when it came down to the vote, we asked for $200,000, which is the top that we could ask for, knowing that we'd have to do a lot of fundraising and matching. We had a lot of commitment for in-kind, but that wasn't going to make the match. We couldn't do it totally in-kind. So we sent our letter in. The NEA came back and said, we really like this, but we only have $150,000. Can you still do it? So we sat down and figured out where we could cut back, what activities we could cut back on, and really cut back very little. I mean, everybody was kind of like, we're going to do this anyway. So we just a lot more in kind sort of came from. We all agreed to do more fundraising, which is what we're in the throes of right now, trying to go out and raise the matching funds. So after we submitted a revised budget and a slightly revised work plan, the NEA said, you've been awarded. So that was about not quite a year's worth of work. And now the real work starts. So the grant funds are coming into the city of Albuquerque. We are writing individual contracts with each of the other partners. AMAFCA is not receiving any funds from the National Endowment for the Arts. They are actually a in-kind and potentially in the future a cash match. UNM School of Architecture and Planning is receiving funds. Little Globe and Story Place are receiving funds. Margie and Buster are receiving funds. Sorry, I should have really done like a whole diagram of this so that you can see like the play-by-play here. City of Albuquerque is not receiving, I mean, we're receiving all the funds from the NEA, but everything is just flowing through our department. So each of those entities that are getting funds from the NEA have their own individual contract with the City of Albuquerque. So right now we have 2 of them almost close to being finished. We'll have 3 more to go. The contract between the City of Albuquerque and UNM is a whole other animal. That happens at a level way up here above me. The contract with the 2 consultants, Margie and Buster, will be fairly simple. They're fairly small. In order for everybody to feel comfortable about what their roles and responsibilities we have drafted and are very close to signing a memorandum of understanding between everybody. So everybody knows what their roles are. Everybody understands that everybody's equally committed to fundraising, because we still have to raise about $80,000 to make sure we meet our NEA match. And we have since then, I could tell immediately this is going to be a huge administrative task on our department. And we actually, every semester, have an intern from UNM from some department or another. And I realized that we could probably put a very qualified intern to use helping us manage just the paperwork side of this from the NEA. So we did a call for, this is the first time we've ever had a master's student intern, and it's paid. And we have a master's student intern from the School of Public Administration. And she is actually the person helping me closest do all of the paperwork. So when I get an email from the National Endowment for the Arts that says, "Hi, congratulations on your grant. Here's the 17-page Americans with Disabilities Act workbook that you need to fill out," I turn it over to the intern and say, "Read this and let us know what we need to do."
What are you paying her per hour?
She's getting paid $10 an hour as an intern, and she's also getting academic credit for it. So that was another expense that we took on. I would have had an intern anyway, $10 an hour. We just decided to apply it.
20 hours a week?
No, not quite. She's probably more like 12. Maybe 16.
Okay.
So she's doing that. We also ended up completely pulling in our departmental marketing and public relations contractor to help us get all of our materials together so that we're all using the same information. We have been working on trying to develop a logo for the project, and obviously we've got so many people at the table that everybody, very, very creative people, and have very strong ideas about what this project means to them. We're having a very hard time getting agreement on a logo for the project, and we put a lot of people's time and creativity into trying to come up with a logo. Hopefully we'll get something out of it that everybody can agree on, but that's another added expense.
Are you very deep into that process, that logo?
The logo? We've been at it now for about 3 weeks.
You know, you might ask Kilmer and Kilmer if they could help you sort it out, so to speak. They do that every day. They're right down there on Truman.
Right.
And, you know, Richard and Brenda it's something they would enjoy doing.
Okay.
Gotta just talk to you about how to get there.
Right, right. Well, we've got graphic artists from the art museum and from the biopark that you know, they're professional graphic artists, and they're helping us do it. And that's part of our in-kind expense, because we do not have any money to pay somebody else to do that. That's something in the budget that we.
I would imagine Brenda and Richard would do it.
Gratis.
Yeah.
Okay.
They sure would.
All right. Well, that's
and they're right on
interesting to know.
66.
Right.
They're right there.
Yeah, that's true. Let's see, what else? Okay, here's the most important lesson we learned. We wrote up the grant. The idea was to, in the International District, there's really no public space, especially right on Central Avenue. There's lots of empty spaces, but the city doesn't own anything. The city partially owns a building that's being turned into affordable housing, and there's going to be sort of a little sort of widened bus stop, but that's about it. So the idea is that we had already identified, before we even wrote the grant, or we wrote into the grant, we had identified about 7 pieces of vacant property that we thought this would be good. And so, because we really kind of wanted to be on Route 66, it's closest to the water lines that Amafka has access to. But when we wrote the grant, we said that we wanted to, you know, identify and construct and build. We wanted to design. This is a 2-phase thing. We wanted to do a community process to design and select a site for a public space. The second phase would be to build a public space on historic Route 66. Because we use the word historic Route 66, we now have to go through an extra entire set of approvals from the State Historic Preservation Office to get the State Historic Preservation Officer to state that under a Section 103 review, none of the properties that we are looking at are historic, which is kind of crazy because everything on Route 66 could be considered historic, and we went specifically for things that are not built on, that are vacant property, and we've explained that to the NEA, but because we use the word historic in our grant application, they can't cut us any slack. So my advice to you is do not ever use the word historic in your application.
You could still have a potential contributing, in historic terms, you have contributing and non-contributing.
Right.
And you could have a potential contributing site.
Right.
And there could be artifacts on that site. And you go through that on Santa Fe historically.
Right. So in order to even get the money flowing from the grant, we don't even know what site it's going to be, but in order to get the money flowing from the NEA for the grant, we have to have the letter from the State Historic Preservation Office saying that we're okay to use any of these properties. They're in a dilemma right now because all of these properties are privately owned. We don't know if the city's ever really going to own one. That would definitely be another step in this. And the State Historic Preservation Office is not exactly sure how to make their determination because the city doesn't own it. And we're asking for this 106 determination on property we don't even own. So we're in a little bit of a bind with that right now. And we're trying to get a conditional approval, not even knowing exactly which property we're going to go forward with. And the thing that's really frustrating to us is that this project that the NEA is funding is not even for construction. It's only for the design process. But they don't want any federal money going into something that could have an adverse effect on something historic. Even though, yeah.
Do you think that having the historic Route 66 that in your proposal helped you get the proposal?
Well,
That's why
it is kind of a catch-22.
Yeah.
Because
Well, you're talking about the heritage of the country.
Mhm.
Talking about Route 66. And you brought some good intellectual people in, at a national level.
right.
This is a wonderful group. I can see why you got it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, we felt pretty confident about it, but there's definitely some things we probably do differently. But it is kind of that catch-22. I don't know if we said that we wanted it along the Route 66 corridor, but it could be in the neighborhood and get it actually off of Central Avenue. I don't know. Would that have been as favorable? Yeah.
There have to have been studies on Route 66. I mean, there must be dozens of historical,
Mm-hmm.
studies of Route 66. You can use them as a baseline
Right.
or a benchmark to
Right.
start your discussion about it. And that would probably serve your needs.
Well, yeah, and
Part
that's
of-
and
in part.
exactly, and that's what Story Place is actually doing. They're going to end up doing a lot of that work, but they're already starting to do work and are expecting to get paid for that work. Yet we don't have any money coming from the NEA because we're waiting for the State Historic Preservation Office to give us the okay on property that we don't even own.
You might ask Michael Pride. She's really good at connecting disparate things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things she knows about Rio Rancho was this emerging suburbia,
Mhm.
or the transformation of suburbia back into, a real place.
Right.
And what you're talking about is a transformation of Route 66 from where it was historically
Right.
to where it is. And the city, the whole sustainability layer that's overlaid the city, she could really help you figure out how to bridge that. And she'll pull a person out of her hat too. who can
Right.
do it for her.
Well, she's been right there at the table in all of these discussions, and she's a bit baffled
Mm.
as well. And we're trying to figure out how to help the State Historic Preservation Officer give us a determination that's not inconclusive.
Mhm.
Because we have another project that we did where we had the State Historic Preservation Office write a letter for us, and the NEA said it's inconclusive, we're not gonna fund you.
Figuring out, they've got resources that are national, they can tap.
Oh, I'm sure they do, but the problem is we've got 2 nonprofit organizations that are chomping at the bit that have made these commitments to their other funders, and they're ready to get going, and now we have no money to flow to them. So we're really, you know, as the administrator, as the city administrator doing this, we're in a bind. The other thing is that we're still in the process right now of getting the grant appropriated through city council. So we're buying ourselves a little bit of time with that process with the nonprofits, explaining to them that there's no way we can even commit any city funds, existing city funds, as a loan to the project until we get the SHPO letter that the NEA approves, until we get city council to approve the grant. And that's just going through the process.
Did
It's
Taos
just
have to do any historical review?
Taos?
Yeah.
I don't know.
When they got theirs?
I don't know. I know that they got one. I also know that there was one of the Pueblos, I believe, got one, but I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
you mentioned three rejections. What can you tell us about that? And how could we try to avoid
Sure.
3 rejections?
Well, the you know, placemaking, this concept of placemaking is what really, I think, grounded this one, which is it's a very interesting term. But the first one that we applied for was with a nonprofit or arts, a nonprofit television education video production company, and we had an extra unused cable TV channel, government access channel, through Comcast in Albuquerque, and we wanted to turn that into the arts and cultural channel. And we were going to partner with the nonprofit, which is UPublic, which does education programming, and they produce a lot of stuff. And they were going to be our nonprofit, and we were going to use this to fund a 1-year model program to use that unused cable channel. We thought it'd be great. I thought we made an absolutely strong case for this benefiting all the arts and cultural organizations and the citizens, and really putting information out there and being able to tell the stories about arts organizations as well as promotions and marketing, and really tell about what kind of art is happening in Albuquerque. And I don't think it was place-based enough. It didn't say Albuquerque, it just said new TV station. Yeah. And it just wasn't, even though we know that we are so desperately lacking in Albuquerque of getting information out about what is going on, which is why we've started this whole other arts and cultural calendar project, which I think you all heard some about. So that one just flatly rejected. The other one that, I'm trying to remember the third one. The other one that I remember that was rejected was enhancing the New Mexico Jazz Festival that ties in with the Route 66 Summerfest event, and really turning into a really big arts and cultural festival. Again, I just don't think it had that sort of long-lasting sense of placeness about it. It was a festival.
More event than a place.
Yeah. Even though it was really big, and we had a great lineup, and we had huge amounts of community involvement. We had the Nob Hill Main Street, we had the jazz workshop, we had Outpost, we had a whole bunch of different entities. It was just, to them, it was just a festival. So, I think when we literally talked about going under the ground and pulling water up and using water to tell the story of this historical community, that is not seen as historical. I think that literally grounded it in a way that the other ones weren't grounded. So that would be, but it is kind of interesting too, because you get a little bit of a mixed message, I think, because they will fund certain things, certain types of plans. I mean, plans, actual construction, artwork, different things like that. And for a while there, we thought, well, maybe we're not even in the ballpark on this. But then we decided, because initially we all wanted to end up with something built. If we're going to go through all this work with the community, we want to build something. And everybody knew that it was just going to be impossible to do it with the kind of budget that we were talking about. So we reeled the whole thing back in and said, okay, we're going to ask for money for a plan to build something later. So.
Are you creating a website for this?
Sort of. It's in discussion right now about how we would create it and how we would manage it, because nobody has any staff to really manage it. Really?
That's what they do.
Wow.
Build websites.
For free?
Well, talk to them.
Okay.
They're big community leaders.
Okay.
Talk to Richard.
Okay. There's a lot of competing interests for what the website would do. I think the city's a little bit hesitant to sort of get too involved in. So for right now, everybody's agreed that they would, as soon as we get this kind of logo idea, everybody's going to build out a separate page on their existing web page. So Little Globe's going to have one for this. Story Place is going to have one for this. UNM School of Architecture is going to have one for it. We already have one on our City of Albuquerque webpage, just to kind of say, here's the partners, here's the grant we got. And everybody's going to put their information, and everybody's going to link to each other's Story of Route 66 webpage, so that at least they can all be connected. There's several other entities within the UNM School of Architecture. They're actually even bringing in a little bit from the College of Fine Arts with the Arts Lab. They have very different interests. Some of them want to have basically huge sort of Pinterest pages, just pictures of what's going on in the International District, just taking lots and lots of pictures of things so that students can pull those pictures up and start to use them to help illustrate what the site might look like. There's other people who want it to be a sort of message board for, hey, met you at the Stories of Route 66 meeting, but we should get together and talk about how to have a bee club, and do beekeeping and make honey together, and how do we produce and market honey from the International District. So the problem is we didn't put in the budget anything for a webpage, and we're still grappling with how to.
Have you thought about talking to the state's Main Street program about it a little bit? I mean, down the road, they could kind of continue the story.
Yeah.
For
So this is an example of exactly what happens at every single meeting we have.
Yeah.
Our project gets spun off into all these other things. And at one point, we all came together and we had to have an agreement about what the NEA funded, what the entities are doing with the NEA money, and we are tracking the NEA money. We're encouraging lots of other stuff to happen, but we're not funding them. We're not letting any money get pulled off into that. We're being somewhat restrictive about whether or not they get to say they're part of this project, because we had to draw some lines just for management.
Main Street might be able to help you with your construction problem. The next, because your NEA grant isn't for bricks and mortar, it's not for construction, but the state's Main Street, they could build on the NEA grant the next phase after it's completed and go into a construction phase.
Right.
And the mayor would help.
I think the problem is there's not an official Main Street organization in the International District yet. I think they're working on that, but they got a ways to go. Right now they're trying to launch Knobville Main Street. It's pretty well off the ground, but they're still getting some more structure around it. So International District is probably poised to be the next Main Street organization, but I don't think they've applied yet. And it's my understanding, I mean, Main Street is pretty particular about, you know, where, you know, they work with their established Main Street organizations. So. Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. But they're very strict on making sure that there's an established entity with a certain boundary. I mean, I've been working with Main Street for 15, 16 years, and we've been going through this back and forth on the downtown Arts and Cultural District and their Main Street. So, yeah, I think as soon as the International District gets an organization established to be a Main Street, then that would be great, because they could probably help with capital outlay. So, but we're looking at putting it in the GO bond cycle.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
Just quickies. Your Cultural Services Department, you have a permanent paid position there?
I do.
Or
Me?
is it you, or who is it?
Well, in the Cultural Services Department working on this project?
No, just in general
Oh,
for the city of Albuquerque.
well, it's me. I'm one of 300 employees in the Cultural Services
You
Department.
have 300.
Roughly. Cultural
That's
Services.
zero.
Yeah. Cultural Services includes the biopark, which is the zoo, the botanic gardens and the aquarium, 17 libraries, the art museum, the chemo theater, South Broadway Cultural Center, art balloon museum, special events, the administrative services, and public art. I oversee public art, and I'm the official grant applicant and the grant administrator for all of this, because we figured it was probably going to end up as a public art project. So yes, I'm a full-time employee. I also have one of my staff who's working on this about the same amount of time I am. About the same amount of time. We're probably putting in, between the two of us, we're probably putting in 6 hours a week.
How do you interact with the outside of, with the city government outside of the Cultural Services Department? Do you have an executive
Formally,
level?
or well, yeah. So my boss is the director of the whole department, and then between her and I, there's a deputy director. Let me tell you, our deputy director probably put in, I don't know, 100 hours just getting the grant application together and having all these meetings. Yeah, it took a lot of coordination to do that. And she's the one right now writing all the contracts, doing the general scope of services for the contracts. We also have our contract liaison in our department who's entering the contracts and routing them all the way through the system, the legal system and the purchasing system for approval. In terms of how we work with other departments. The public art program works with every other department because we are funded by 1%, 1% of all of their bonds. So fire station gets GO bond money, we're doing a project with the fire station. So we have a very long history of working with all the other departments in public art. Now, special events does as well because they do all the permitting, so they work very close with the fire department, environmental health, biopark. They have some interdepartmental relations as well that are a little less formal, but yeah. So for the purposes of this project, right now, the department that we're working with closest is the planning department, because they're the ones that are helping us identify the property and what the property zoning is and kind of what's going on with those vacant lots, and whether or not they have other long-range plans for that particular area. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, part of it.
Okay.
It's okay. We have an emerging, we're going to have an emerging cultural affairs department here, and we're still, in the infancy
Right.
of that.
Right.
We don't have any staff. We are all volunteers.
Right.
And as a young city, that person's going to touch every department.
Oh yeah.
And we need to figure out how to put that person in the right place to make best impact. So but we don't want them to get drowned either.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Believe me, I understand. I mean, public art has now been in cultural services it'll be 4 years, April 1st. Before that, for 20 years, we were under public works because we were CIP funded, and all the CIP projects were in Public Works, and so that was our, but when this new administration came in, I asked the CAO to consider moving us out of Public Works over to Cultural Services, because thank you, Public Works, we learned very well from all the engineers how to build art. We now need to be in the department that knows how to celebrate art, because we have over 800 pieces of work in our collection, and the engineers, God bless them for building roads and sidewalks and storm drainage, they don't have the same frame of mind when it comes to celebrating art in the community. So we were sort of buried over there. So.
Under 800 pieces.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's worked out really well.
You have a big hill to climb.
Yeah. Yeah, so any other questions or, you know, there's a couple of resources out there. I don't know, Paula, do you follow Ian Moss in Create Equity, his blog?
No,
Okay, so there's this,
I don't think so.
this
No.
super smart young kid. I call him young kid. I mean, he's probably in his early 30s. Harvard graduate who's pretty much made an amazing career out of evaluating arts management policies. His name is Ian Moss, and he has a blog called Create Equity. It's all one word. It's like the word create and then equity all bunched together. And he has really delved into this concept of placemaking, creative placemaking, and he's done really good critiques on other people's reports about what creative placemaking is and what it does and how to measure it. What is creative placemaking and what's its impact? What are we saying we're doing here? So he's done some really good analysis of that, and I would go to his blog and just Google creative placemaking, or just go to his blog, and on the right hand side he's got one of those word things, you know, where the word he uses the most is bigger font. I can't remember what they're called. They're like a word cloud.
It's worded.
Cloud tag.
It's called a
Or
Wordle.
Wordle.
Is it Wordle, something like that. Anyway, if you go to his little word cloud, creative placemaking is one of the big ones. You just click on it and it will pull up all of his articles about creative placemaking.
Okay.
And the people that he analyzes is Ann Markison, the measures indicator guy from the NEA. I think his last name is Iyengar. I think it's Shane Iyengar. Anyway, there's several people on there who've written about this, and he really sort of takes them to task and breaks it down about what this whole concept of creative placemaking is. Then I would definitely Google Margie Waller and look at her materials on arts and community impact, and in particular her report, The Ripple Effect. There's some really good information in there. Another good one is she's working right now for the Kresge Foundation, which is one of the really big foundations that funds the Art Place grant, and that is Maria Rosario Jackson. I would highly recommend reading some of her articles. You can just Google her, and she's done a lot of work with the Urban Institute and how the arts, you know, affect cities. But I think it's, you know, even if you just kind of took one or two from each of those authors and kind of peruse through them and get a sense of this idea of creative placemaking, I think that would be useful if you want to apply for the grant.
And there's the placemaking site too. It has a lot of P's in their name. It's
Yeah, I know. And that was the other one I was trying to think of. It's
I get their feed.
Public Places.
Public placemaking.
Public Places something institute.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
I'll just have to look.
Yeah.
Actually, I probably have some articles already on our blog/website, so you just go look to that, and because I just introduce the article and you just link through to the rest of it, so it'll take you to one of those pages.
Sherrie, do you think it's unrealistic of us with no actually paid staff or anyone to do all of this paperwork and grant writing to even take them at
Um,
this point?
No, I don't think it's unrealistic. It's I think what's making it really big for us is that we have 7 partners, and we're trying to manage all this. We actually set up an internal SharePoint site, which is a cloud-based system where we have people can log on, and we keep all of our documents there, and we have tables that people can put their information in. And we've tapped. I mean, we should be including our IT guys' time for setting up this SharePoint site. And we're trying to maintain keeping all these documents there, but that's because we've got so many people doing different things. You know, Valerie's hiring artists, and she's with Little Globe and Story Place are interviewing people, and we decided we want to keep a big contact list. And you know, Michael Pride's out there meeting and talking to everybody, and you know, trying to keep track of all of this stuff. But I think if you are successful in getting a grant with one nonprofit and the city, you're going to cut down on a lot of that information management. You know, the grant itself is, you know, they have it's the same form you're going to go through no matter what size government you are. You know, it's not that much. So what they do is they really take you to task and make you say everything you can in a very short you know, set of a space, you know, in your budget. But it's got to be well thought out. I think that's the.
You know, what you've demonstrated here is that you have a social fabric.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean, there's a social fabric here.
Mhm.
It goes beyond just, you know, a couple of entities. This is stronger than that.
Mhm.
It's almost placemaking at a social level.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's very strong. You know, I think, James, we're going to do this, and we're going to do it in our way, but we're going to have to find some of those essential, you know, the essence of here. And what we have, you pulled out the essence of what you have and the extended
Right.
connections,
Mhm.
and we'll find that. We'll find it. We'll have a strong thesis, but we got to get there.
Yeah, but I would start small. I mean, the only reason why we went as big as we did is because the mayor said, I want all of you to be part of this. And everybody, you know, came to the table and said, well, I'm not giving up my part. I want this grant. I'm kind of counting on getting $50,000. That's what I was going to ask for. So by the time you get them all at the table, and everybody goes, well, I want my 50, I want my 50. The next thing you know, you're asking for $200,000. But we then have the resources at the table to justify why we're asking for $200,000. The starting off small and, you know, doing something a little smaller that still has some impact on the ground. It doesn't have to be huge, but you know, I think that would be a little more manageable for, you know, because there's going to have to be someone at the city who's going to you know, do formal communications. I mean, just getting the grant in, a designated full-time employee that is granted by the municipality as the authorizing agent will have to submit the grant. I don't think you guys would be, unless somehow your elected officials, you know.
Well, we have a
grant
grants,
do that, so.
we have a grants administrator, but that person has multiple duties and they do a lot of other things. And basically, they submit the grants, they submit our grants, however, they don't write the grant application. They only.
It's a normal thing across this country for small cities to have people do multiple things.
Yeah.
That's normal.
Yeah.
So.
Well, but if the Arts Council writes the grant and, you know, says what you want it to say, then yeah, then that's just
The
process.
city can process it, yeah. or
Right,
submit
and then
it.
the city will have to process the appropriations part of it, you know, have to go through the city council, or the, you know, if it's small enough, can the city manager approve it? Or?
It would have to go to the city council.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's just another, you know, that's just adding another thing to the agenda. Then writing a contract with the nonprofit so that the money can flow through to them. That's, you know, writing a contract. Yeah, people write contracts all the time, right? Let's see.
What, is 50,000 a small grant or what kind of?
Well, I think, I can't remember, I was just looking for my original grant information. There's very specific chunks that you can apply for. And I think it's, okay, 25, ranging from 25,000 to 200,000. And you have to do it in, like, I don't know, increments of 25,000. So 25,000 would be the smallest that you could apply for.
That helps.
And you have to match it if it's granted.
Yeah, you have to match it. So, you know, you're going to need to get the municipality's agreement to match in kind, or, you know, you are going to have to do fundraising.
If the city had property that they could donate, would that be in kind? Would that be counted as in kind?
You know, I'm not exactly sure how it could, depending on what you're applying for. So their major categories last time was arts engagement, cultural planning, and design.
Does it change every year?
I don't think it's changed much. Okay, the Our Town grant, okay, this is probably why we pulled back, I forgot about this part. The Our Town grant is not available for construction, purchase, or renovation of facilities, which includes design fees, community planning, and installation of public, design fees, community planning, and installation of public art are eligible. However, no arts endowment or matching funds may be directed to the cost of physical construction or renovation or towards the purchased cost of facilities or land. So no NEA money could be used for that, but it doesn't necessarily say that cost for land, it might be a match. That,
Like
you know.
an in kind, like if the city gave as part of the matching. Awesome.
No, I'm not sure that would really count because the city already owns it, right? And it's not like they're giving it to you, the Arts Council. The city's still keeping it. It's not like it's changing.
They're funding the intellectual process. And that's funding design.
The NEA is.
The
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Design.
Yep. Yeah, so that first time out, we went for the arts engagement with the video production and the TV channel under programming that fosters interaction among community members, arts organizations, artists, or activates existing cultural and community assets. So we said that unused television station was an asset that was underutilized, but that didn't quite fly. So
You would be able to probably use a lot of your staff time that's involved in the project as a match, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So
Yeah.
Oh.
whatever staff time you put into it could be
Yeah.
used, for managing that. Yeah, which I know right now we're not doing near as good of a job of tracking our time as we probably should be, because it's sort of like, oh, this just came in, do it, and forget to apply that time to the project. So, yeah, what else?
We're going to call you again.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
insightful.
Yeah.
Very insightful.
Well, I'll tell you, there's times when even just internally in our department, we think, oh my God, $150,000, is this worth it? Is this worth
The
what
smaller
we're
amounts, it gets
yeah.
to be really
I
questionable.
know. I
But you know
know.
what they've done is they've made you think about how you talk to each other.
Well, yeah, but I also, am I still on camera? The biggest funded entities in arts and culture. Now, the city this size, probably not so much, but Albuquerque, we're one of the biggest, we're part of the 60 largest cities in the country. We are the second largest cultural affairs department in the country. We are second behind New York City. And that's because we own the zoo and the 17 libraries, and a lot of places they're their own departments, or art museums and zoos are privately owned, or nonprofit foundations. So that's what makes us second behind New York City. The National Endowment for the Arts was getting slammed for not putting more money in larger municipal areas by Congress, by the elected officials. And they were saying, well, why should I vote in favor of the National Endowment for the Arts? The government entity is absolutely committed as a partner. So guess what happens in cities all across the country? Nonprofit arts organizations come knocking at the door. Hey, big city, I'm looking at this $200,000 grant. I would love to get that money. Will you be my partner? Which municipality is going to tell an arts organization no? They're not going to tell no. For actually the first couple of years, the cities were scrambling, trying to figure out a process for fairness, because they were like thrown under the bus so quickly that the NEA barely gave them enough heads up to let them know that, hey, we're going to let all the all the nonprofit arts organizations in your city know that they can apply for this special grant, and you have to be their partner. And it left mayors all over this country, mayors or their designated department officials, trying to figure out, how do we pick one? How do we pick one nonprofit in our big city and apply to this grant? So that's what happened to us for the first couple of years. We did it where we basically said, sorry, arts organizations, if we're going to have to apply for this, we're going to make it meet our mission in the Cultural Affairs Department. The second time we said, okay, well, they didn't like our mission and our purpose, so let's see what you guys have for ideas. And then eventually, what happened was they all came together, and our mayor said, I'm not going to pick one of you. I'm not going to be political. I'm going to make you all work together. If you want to apply for this, we'll apply, but you're all going to figure out how to work together. And so which is actually great, because the result of this is we're all working together. But I can tell you, the City of Albuquerque Cultural Services Department has already put in way more than $150,000 of time and effort into this grant, just in staff time and in resources that we've already put together. And we're not getting a penny of it. It's all flowing right out into the nonprofit arts organizations, which is good, because they kind of get our leadership and our support and our endorsement, and we say that we're part of a process, but we're really rethinking, the value of it to our department. So, it's a bit of a catch-22, because it comes with politics at a lot of different levels. So, yay for the NEA, they can now hold up their report card to congressional members and say, look, we put all this money into your districts that didn't ever used to get any. But it's kind of with the municipalities kicking and screaming. So, I'm sorry, I hate to throw cold water on your idea, but I mean, because it's really good, especially in probably in a municipality where you really don't have any other funding sources. It could be very well worth it to get something, especially to kickstart a project. But and we're lucky. We have 4.5, 5 dedicated staff that are working on this. Anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a week so far. So, but there you go. There's my take on it too.